Hello and welcome to another Tactical Corner. Today, the Drukhari go against the Tau in this first tactical episode of 8th edition. Stay tuned as we learn how to play the game, talk about tactical nuances, and see what we could have changed. Make your game better on SkaredCast Tactical Corners every week after the battle reports. Let's begin. So we begin our tactical corner. 1,000 points of Dark Eldar versus 1,000 points of Tau Empire. We're playing the Relic. And in the Relic, there's one thing that matters. The Relic. Now, Bob hasn't played in a long time. Decided to bring hammerheads. He loves hammerheads. The models look really cool. But let's just say that they're quite versatile. They have submunition rounds to go against infantry, and they have anti-tank weapons as well. Now, I went for a very eclectic list, a little bit of everything: Cabalite warriors, witches, an Archon, a succubus, a couple of puppies, and a Ravager for anti-tank and a Razorwing. Of course, the mandrakes as well, as the mandrakes are fantastic backfield harassers. They're really good with their causing mortal wounds when they shoot, and I think that they should not be underestimated. As for the puppies, I'm not sold on them. I think I need to try them with a Beastmaster in order to get the best results. But tactically, when we're looking at the Tau army, my biggest concern was going to be Longstrike and the other Hammerhead, being able to cut through my raiders with ease. Now, it was only infantry that could really capture the Relic. But, if no one has the Relic, the closest model at the end of the game would win. Now, if you haven't watched the battle report, make sure you check the link down below, where I have posted a link to the battle report. So go over there, watch the battle report first, and then you'll have a better idea of, what we're playing here. Now, in 8th edition, tactically, putting a unit down and then another unit, alternating deployment, means that things like mandrakes that you can put into reserve is really useful, as it essentially, you don't deploy anything and force the opponent to continue to deploy. Other things like flyers allow you to deploy them on the flanks or in the middle of your army, just a generic placement, and with their speed they can really get to wherever you want them, allowing you to deploy and out-deploy your opponent. Now, because of the deployment mechanics, I believe I don't remember if he stole or I let him go first or he went first. But nevertheless, Tau went first. Now the Hammerheads opened up and they were the ones that were dealing most of the damage. And Longstrike is quite the character, allowing bonuses for all Hammerheads near him, making their heavy rail rifles very, very dangerous against my raiders. And there we saw, the raider with the Cabalite warriors essentially blow up, or the witches, sorry, essentially die and have all the witches pop out. But it's nice to see Dark Eldar tanks not die to a stiff breeze. So even though the tank was destroyed and one of the other tanks took some damage, the other raider, I was able to mitigate the damage, even though I did lose first blood. But in the Relic, there is no first blood, so I didn't have to worry about that too much. Now, I was able to keep my Razorwing and Ravager essentially out of line of sight of the Hammerheads, or really wanting to do some damage there, which then meant that they were going to be able to go out and do the most damage. And they did. Against Longstrike, which was my #1 priority for the buffs, all the Lances really took their toll, and I almost killed him. But I should have used the command point rerolls to reroll the damage dealt to Longstrike, and instead I used the rerolls for things like reroll misses or reroll to wounds against the tanks. So in retrospect, I should have just kept the reroll dice for when I was doing damage against the tanks, so my lances would maximize on the amount of damage that they were doing. Now the Tau infantry did quite well, hunkered down in cover, but I was able to flush them out with my own infantry in a prolonged charge. And I was able to cripple long strike on the first turn of shooting. Like in every game or every edition of 40k, focusing your fire is probably the most important part of the game, which means that every lance I had was essentially firing directly onto long strike as much as I could. And I tried to, mitigate the return fire by using line of sight blockers as well as cover to make sure that my army was in position for a second turn strike. Now the second turn I jumped out of my raiders, moved up as quickly as possible and essentially split my forces. I sent the witches and the Archon one way, and I sent the succubus and the Cavalite warriors the other way. Now the biggest reason that I sent both of these different ways was because I wanted the witches to tie up his infantry. The succubus can tie up a unit of infantry, and so can the witches, which would prevent him from falling back and then shooting me up further. Now if I would have sent the Archon and the Cavalites on one end and the witches and the succubus on the other, the side with the Cavalites and the Archon would have been completely destroyed. Now this was a success as my witches got into combat and tied up the Tau infantry. Now they did lose quite a few models in combat, which if you've ever played against Tau, does happen when those fire warriors just don't fail any armor saves or they do a lot of damage. But my Archon was left stranded as he decided to fail his charge with the reroll to charge from Power from Pain. Now I really like the Power from Pain for the Dark Eldar, but it sets you up for 2 second turn charges more than first turn charges. And on the third turn, that's when you get the +1 to weapon skill, which makes witches and other units like Raks and Cavalite warriors quite nasty in close combat, hitting on 2+. My Archon luckily did survive, and I proceeded to put pressure on the relic by capturing it, as well as starting to mop up all the additional infantry. So my Mandrakes then got stuck in as well and went against the broadside in the ruin. But that hammerhead was just very hard to deal with, and with its submunition round, it made quick work with the smart missile systems of my Cavalite warriors out in the open. And as the game was continuing, we were really running out of things to play with. We were both beating the crap out of each other. And I did have the upper hand in terms of the Razorwing and maybe the witches, but it was starting to get really tight towards the end of the game. That, combined with the fact that because of reroll saves, my Mandrakes were having a very hard time dealing with that broadside, because my opponent hadn't used all of his rerolls yet. And that Tau commander was just loaded to the gills with missile launchers. So even though it went back and forth and I had the last part of the turn, at the fateful roll for the game to end on turn 5, the game continued. And even though I would have had it with the Raider near the relic, the Tau had an additional turn to do the damage that they needed to do. And even though I clawed my way up, I just wasn't able to deal the final blows on the commander or the hammerhead to pull the hammerhead off the relic. Let me know what you think down below. I hope you enjoyed the Tactical Corner, and thanks to the patrons who support the channel every single month. You guys are amazing. I really appreciate your feedback. Subscribe, like, and share the videos, and I'll see you guys next week on another SkaredCast Tactical Corner. Skari, out.